welcome to this edition of the Fantasy Premier League show by American Scouser. I am your host, Mateusz, and as you can see, I am alone because Gally decided to go watch a comedy show, is what I'm told. And so by that, I mean he's going to enjoy his life and not have to sit through this painstaking process we're going to go through. And then he will be able to watch this back and have another comedy show of his own. So let's start with kind of where we start most weeks. I don't have all of the right tabs and images that Gally typically has and is able to show all you wonderful people. So what we're going to do is we're going to start here. So what we're going to look at here is the matchups from our American Scouser head-to-head league here. And as you can see, VJ just absolutely ripped me apart this week. Granted, he didn't check his team, but on the flip side, he has not changed his team since the beginning of the year. At the beginning of the year, he has players such as Mo Salah on there that netted him a ton of points this week. I think Mo Salah alone scored more points than I did if you put the armband on him. So not a great week here for myself. Gally also lost to Scott. Scott is making a slow rise up the table like we talked about before. Some other notable matchups. Kelly took care of Jamie. Timichin beat his wife. Sorry, context. Timichin won against his wife. I hope no one is watching this. Okay, so looking at the standings overall, then as we scroll down here, you see I am still atop of the leaderboard, but it is shrinking. The lead is shrinking. I'm only 6 points ahead of Kelly now. She's making a mad dash for first here. Scott has worked his way up to the third. Jamie, BJ, and Gally round out the top six. In the relegation zone, we have VJ and Kazi. So I don't know if we'll actually relegate anyone. It'd be pretty fun if we did. If we had several levels of this, I think it'd be something that we could look into, that we could potentially do. That'd be fun. But that is where we're at here. Now we're going to flip over, take a look at our American Scouser Cup here and see that William Peppard, Team Pep, is still in first place. And more incredibly than that, he is in the top 2,600 of all players in the game. There are over 11 million players in this game, and he is in the top 2,600. Incredible stuff. He was on a wild card this week, but he did still keep Mo Salah, a move that not a lot of wild carders did. So I know myself and Gally included, our wild cards did not pan out the way that we expected them to. I think Gally would tell you, just like myself, we planned for the wild card to help us in this upcoming game week and game week 28 and 29, but not so much last game week where it really hurt. And granted, we did not expect Liverpool to put 7 past Manchester United, but it was sort of looking back on it, it was sort of a weird decision by a lot of players. I know the Twitter community of Fantasy Premier League shifted towards the wild card, and a lot of people followed suit. And unfortunately, looking back on it, I'm kind of upset that I did as well, because for me, the whole point of this game is to have fun. And I found myself just trying to copy what everyone else was doing because I was nervous about what would happen, right? I was nervous that I wouldn't be able to get as many points as everyone else because they were wildcarding. I didn't understand why everyone was wildcarding. I thought that the next game week, this game week upcoming now, would be the one wildcard in. And that was my plan all along until I started reading a lot and seeing a lot of what was going on the FPL community and seeing a ton of people that were going for the wild cards and hitting that button. So I ended up hitting the button as well as Gally and then with that, I took out all of my Liverpool assets, which obviously hurt last week. So just a little frustrating that I would let something so silly like the mainstream audience of this game dictate what I want to do, because at the end of the day, this is just meant to be fun, right? This is meant to be an exercise in having something to watch. How many times do you say that you want to watch, Everton not Everton. We of course we like to watch Everton lose on this channel here. I don't know. Let's say like we have Palace and Aston Villa playing. There really aren't many times you'd want to watch that unless you have one of their fantasy assets. And so for me, it was a bit disappointing to have to go through that. But nonetheless, we will continue to move on here. And we'll talk about, let me switch to this tab here. talk about our incomings and our outgoings this week across the community. In our incomings, you see the likes of Matoma, Tony, Estupinian, me, and McAllister. All of those players are on doubles this week. So not a big surprise there. Matoma and McAllister had huge game weeks last week. Some players had both. Some players had both and started them. Some players had both and had to bench one, Gally. And so unfortunately, it didn't work out for everyone. And I'll get to the teams that we had last week and talk a little bit more about that. But yeah, I'm not surprised these are your top 5 ins this week because of the double game week. Tony, when Brentford has a penalty, he's scoring. He scored the last, I think, the 22 of them. He hasn't missed. And then just Estupinian, Matoma, McAllister, and you could even throw in Gross and March in that category there of just all good picks to have, all good assets to have for this upcoming game week, plus moving forward, right? So with Brighton having 2 double game weeks, it's big. And so we see a lot of players tripling up on Brighton assets. Going over to the screen, looking at our transfers out, we have the likes of Riyad Mahrez and Nketiah, Odegaard, De Bruyne, Almiron. I think part of this for me is seeing that Nketiah and Odegaard might have been hurt and people were immediately trying to make a move for that. I think some people are also worried about Nketiah long-term, which is fair, especially with Gabriel Jesus coming back into the fold. Odegaard, I feel like with the price that he's at, I think some people made the move over to a Brighton mid, whether it was Matoma or McAllister, March. So that doesn't surprise me. De Bruyne is a little interesting. I know City's fixtures aren't that great coming up, and maybe that was part of it. It was maybe De Bruyne was one of the cash cows that a team had. So what they wanted to do instead is to use that cash, use that money to build other pieces across your team. There's a good chance that De Bruyne was one of those that a lot of people moved off of to a Brighton asset. Let's say, De Bruyne down to Matoma or McAllister to set up another move to maybe in the forwards of maybe moving up to Tony if you were sitting on a sub-6 striker or sub-6 forward, excuse me. So having that as your plan there. Almiron, one of those, I think, also in line with moving over to Matoma or McAllister or March, any of the Brighton mids. Plus, City do blank, so coming up. So that's another big thing is that we have to remember is that City does blank in 28. Yeah, in 28. And so if I share this tab here, we can kind of go through and take a look at what's going on in the next couple game weeks. This is footballfallout.com. This is a great resource for anyone looking to look ahead, definitely towards this part of the season when fixtures are kind of coming thick and fast and not knowing when to play your chips or how to play your chips. This website can definitely help. What you can do is you can actually, as you see here, you can scroll down and pick how many game weeks you want to see into the future. So do you want to see just this game week? Then you have all this set up, and it's gonna rank the fixtures list accordingly. So Brentford is away at Everton, away at Southampton. They rank that the same as Brighton being away to Leeds and home to Palace as the easiest fixtures. You scroll all the way down to the bottom. You have Wolves away at Newcastle, Forest away at Tottenham, Fulham home against Arsenal, and Bournemouth home against Liverpool as the worst fixtures of the week. But then if you look at, let's say, the next 3 game weeks, right, what it does, it refreshes and it gives a new score to the fixtures. So if for over the next 3 game weeks, this website is ranking Newcastle's fixtures as the best, having Wolves at home, Forest away, and then a double with United at home and West Ham at home. And then you can scroll down, you see Arsenal's on that list as well. Brentford, while they have a great double this week, they do have a tough double in 29, and it is important to note that there are 2 away games for that double. So there's been some discourse, I guess I would say, some conversations between a lot of content creators in terms of, was the wild card last week the right move? In hindsight, right, you can say anything is the right move or the wrong move. But people were at the time questioning why you would try to scrap your team for a bunch of Brentford and Brighton assets. The Brighton ones we do understand because they're a much better team than Brentford, and their fixtures are a little bit better than Brentford's. But Brentford having 4 away matches in those 2 doubles and not really producing it the same way Brighton producing it is a bit of a head scratcher to think. A lot of teams ripping up the wild card or ripping up their teams for the wild card just to get a couple Brentford assets. If you didn't have any Brentford or Brighton assets, I understand. Or if your team was a huge mess, I get it. But there's a lot of discourse on kind of questioning why, especially the top 10K. If you look at the statistics, 67% of the top 10,000 elite or the elite 10K hit the wild card, and the ones who didn't obviously moved up a lot more in the ranks because they held on to Liverpool assets that they hit in the week before, which kind of drives another point of, if you're going to make big hits on certain players because you like their fixtures just to wildcard them out in the next week, what is the point of doing that? And that's another conversation that we can have, but that's something to think about. So scrolling down over the next 3 game weeks. So this is sort of the moment here where I thought I was going to be wildcarding this week and not last week, so be it. But this is the week that I would have been taking a look at in hopes to set up for 27 and 29, because 28 is a big blank game week. So we have some big teams on a blank in 28. When you scroll down the list, you can start to see Brighton on a blank, right? You've got West Ham on a blank, United on a blank, Liverpool on a blank, Fulham on a blank, City on a blank. So those are 1, 2, 3, 4. No one has any West Ham assets. 5 teams on blanks in 28 that a lot of players have between 1 to 2 assets from per team, I would say. Some are different than others, of course. Some players don't have any sort of City assets. Some players moved away from Holland this game week just because they saw that City has Palace away and then a blank and then Liverpool at home. So not necessarily the easiest next 3 game weeks at all. Palace usually have some sort of weird result in them every season. And Palace has given City trouble in the past, and we saw them draw 0-0 last year at Palace. So it's not anything that's a done deal there. So looking back up, if we start to scroll up, we see Liverpool here, Bournemouth away, blank game week, and then a double, right? So sometimes you got to think about with these doubles, are they worth attacking? So you've got City away and Chelsea away. That's a very tough double. And so I know there's some players who moved away from their Liverpool assets with a wild card last week because they were thinking of the blank game week. They were thinking of the double against City and Chelsea. But maybe that was a bit premature because as we saw against United, they were able to score 7. And yeah, maybe Chelsea and City aren't good defensive fixtures, but they could be really good attacking fixtures, right? We could see potentially 4 or 5 goals total out of Liverpool between those 2 games. So kind of depends on who you want to invest your money in. Right now, I don't think there's much else to be said besides either having Mo or Darwin. Gakpo is interesting, but with the amount of mids available at that price range, don't really necessarily see a lot of people moving on to the Gakpo train. Scrolling up a little bit more, you see United on a double, away at Newcastle, home to Brentford. West Ham's on a double there. Forest on a pretty decent double. Someone looking at it, you could pick up someone like maybe Morgan Gibbs-White could be a good one. Maybe Brennan Johnson could be a good asset there. Home to Wolves and away to Leeds. The home to Wolves, Forest at City Park is a tough fixture, and then away at Leeds that could be a high scoring fixture. We don't know, but we could see a few goals in that game. And then you scroll back up, looking at Brighton here at home against Brentford, away against Bournemouth. Great fixtures there. Bournemouth, they have a double as well. If there might be a sneaky, maybe Bournemouth attacker or defender you want to throw on there, just because it's a double. And then you've got Leicester away at Palace, home to Villa. Could be a sneaky good fixture for the likes of James Maddison, which I brought in on my wild card. We'll get into that a little bit later, but yeah, and then you've got Villa here. Chelsea away, Leicester away, not so great. Leeds with Arsenal away, Forest at home. I don't know. Leeds assets are kind of hit and miss. I know Nanto was a big talking point, about last month, but has really fallen off now. Chelsea home at Villa, home at Liverpool. Again, tough to say what'll happen there. I think maybe we might be able to see Chelsea kind of slowly turning the leaf with Potter under the helm. Finally, might be getting something going here. They had the win. They had the big win last week. Then they had the win against Dortmund in the midweek. So that could be something to keep your eye on, especially the likes of maybe Ben Chilwell. I know it's a little bit more expensive than that 5.8, 5.9, but something to consider. And then again, we go back up to Brentford. We talked about that earlier. And then Newcastle with a double, home against United and away to West Ham. Those are tough to predict as well. West Ham could drill them 4-0, or it could be a really close 1-1. I think it's one of those where West Ham is going to David Moyes really, I know he has until the rest of the year, but he's really got to start figuring something out because getting shellacked by Brighton 4-0 is not a good look, especially this late in the season when you're trying to fight off relegation. So let's move on to my team here, and let's take a look at what happened last week. So like I said, I went on a wild card, right? So let me blow this up for you guys here. 43 points, which was dead average, right? I moved up 10,000 places. So out of 11 million people, I moved up 10,000 places. So really, it didn't move the needle one way or another. It's technically a green arrow. Sure, that's fine. But really didn't do much for my rank overall. Still outside of the top 1 million, which is really where I wanted to end, especially considering last year how well I finished. Still a long way to go, so we'll see. But this was my wildcarded team. So I brought in Kepa, Zinchenko, Henry, Estupinian, Saka, Martinelli, Madison, McAllister, Holland, Mbeumo, Kane, Raya, Rashford, Trippier, Burn. So let's talk about it, right? So I kept Trippier. I think out of everyone that I had, I kept Trippier, I kept Martinelli, and that's about it. Maybe and Estupinian, and that's about it. So I moved everyone else. I know Ben Mee was the more popular pick for Brentford defenders, but I wanted to go with someone that was a little bit of a differential because I'm at this rank where I'm not really playing for much at this point besides just my own fun and my own pride. So I went with Rico Henry and I went with Mbeumo because I wanted something different than the Tony Mee combinations that I was seeing. And honestly, if Mbeumo puts that chance away in the first 5 minutes with the Rico Henry cross, that's an extra 12 or extra 10 points there, and I'm good to go. I'd be much, much happier than where I'm at right now. I ended up going with Zinchenko over the likes of Gabriel because, again, I liked the potential of the production from that left side as opposed to Gabriel's corner kick threat. I brought Saka in because I haven't had him for a long time, and it's one of those where you need to have him players. I ended up going with McAllister out of the Brighton mids. I thought about maybe doing McAllister and Matoma and then, not doing Madison, kind of keeping a couple million in the bank just in case. But I ended up going with Madison because I knew I was going to want him in eventually, so I figured I might as well pull the trigger. McAllister, of course, had a great game week. Matoma also had a great game week. Holland dud, right? Kane dud. So not great. In hindsight, I would have, of course, loved to have had Darwin in instead of Kane. Looking back, I wish I did that because I did think about that. I did toy with that. I had at one point Darwin in my draft for the wild card. It was this exact team with Darwin and Matoma instead of Madison and Kane, leaving some in the bank for any future moves that I was planning. But alas, this is where we are. I did decide to bench Rashford because I felt like while I didn't expect Liverpool to win 7-0, I thought it was going to be a very sluggish game from both sides for some reason. And I guess maybe bias in me said, yeah, I want Liverpool to win and I don't want to see Rashford score and United to win. So I'll just bench him. And if it bites me, it bites me. But at least, but if it works out, it kind of works out. So it kind of sucks to have a player like that on your bench. But at this point in the season, if you have a pretty strong team, there's going to be a few candidates for benching every week. So that's where we're at with that. If we scroll down actually here, the cool thing about this is live FPL. If you guys haven't used this before, there's a lot of good information on here. You just put in your ID for your fantasy team, and it comes up with all of these stats. And the coolest thing I think down here when you scroll down is it gives you your transfers and it just counts it up for you, right? So I took out João Felix for Kane, and this was just not necessarily that specific transfer. It was just that this player was in this position, and now this player occupies that position. So Kane in for Felix, and Mbeumo in for Darwin, Rashford in for Almiron, McAllister for Andreas Pereira, Saka in for Mahrez, Madison for Salah, Burn for Williams, Estupinian for Dean, Zinchenko for Gabriel, Henry for White. Ben White was one of those that a lot of people were upset about that didn't start. In the end, they were happy when he was able to sub in and get an assist, so that was huge for them. Not huge for every other player with Arsenal defense because they could not keep Bournemouth out of the net. But as you can see here, highlight that my wild card netted me a -23. So if I had not wildcarded, if I had not made any moves whatsoever, I would, instead of 43, been sitting on 66, which would have been a great game week. Would have really moved me up the rankings. But these are the decisions you make, and decisions you have to live with. And that's what fantasy is. You just kind of you do what you can, and you hope to get something out of it. So at least there's that. Looking over at, let's take a look at Gally's team. Gally and I had a very similar team, right? We both had Kepa. We both had an Arsenal defender. We both had a Brentford defender. He went with Gabriel and me. We both had a Stupinian. We both had Saka. We both had another Arsenal mid asset. So I had Martinelli. He has Odegaard. Rashford here, we both have Mitoma and McAllister. I have Madison. He's got Mitoma. Ivan Toney, he has, and I went with Mbuemo. And then Kane and Holland, we both have Trippier and another Newcastle D. He has Botman. I have Dan Burn. And then we both have Raya in, most likely for the double game week that's coming up. Kepa, of course, another clean. So he's been performing really well over the last 4 to 6 weeks fantasy wise. So it's just kind of one of those, at this point, set and forget keepers. I know we like to say that often, but hopefully this is one of those. And maybe not set and forget in the sense that in the next 3 weeks we might see a little bit of rotation between Raya and Kepa, depending on how much we like the Brentford double. Because I know, like we talked about earlier, some of those two doubles are not necessarily the easiest doubles. They're all away. And so you just want to kind of pick the right weeks, pick the right game weeks to try and have that Raya over Kepa decision. Most likely Kepa in 29 against Liverpool, and Leicester you're probably not going to do. So that's a game week for Brentford, for Raya, even though they do have a not so easy double that game week as well. If we scroll down and take a look at what Gally transferred in and transferred out, actually nothing. So we don't even get to see anything. So he apparently didn't do any transfers, which is a lie, because he wildcarded, because this is his team. This is his wildcard team. So maybe, actually, if we just, let me go find him, right? Let's go here. Let's share this tab instead. So we're looking at Gally's team from this week here. Let's go back. So he kept Kepa. He booted out Bueno, Tarkovsky, Mahrez, Salah, Martinelli, Leon Bailey, Darwin Nunez, Ward, Mitrovic, and those are the guys that he kicked out. So let's see, missed out on Salah, missed out on Darwin, and then the rest didn't really miss out on anything else. So there is that. So that's kind of what his moves were. Now, he told me that going into the next couple weeks, his idea for this week is to hold for now, is what he told me. He will hold his transfer and then next week look to do like a Holland to Ollie Watkins to not worry about that blank for City. And then maybe using, actually, let me see what he said exactly, because that doesn't sound right in my head now that I'm saying it out loud. So he said his plan is to roll it over and move Holland out next week for Watkins, and then have the double transfers for 29 and make bench boosts. So that's, I think, where both of our heads are at. We both set up our teams for a 29 bench boost. I know I've talked about maybe free hitting in 28, but with the setup of the wildcard teams that we both have and not having any Liverpool assets, I think it saves us from needing the free hit in 28, which would allow us to free hit maybe this week, right? So what we might want to do is we might want to look into possibly free hitting. If we take a look at my team here and see what we have lined up. So currently I've got Raya in goal. I know I like the Kepa fixture against Leicester, but Raya away at Everton and away at Southampton, I'll always take those two over one fixture against Leicester, especially away at King Power. Leicester could score 4, they could get absolutely blown out. So then we've got Trippier, Henry, and Stupinian and then Mbuemo. So we've got McAllister as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4 doubles in that rotation there. I've been flirting with the idea of dropping Holland down to Watkins already, or dropping Holland down to Darwin Nunez to at least maybe have this fixture against Bournemouth this week. But that goes into conversation about maybe free hitting this week. But then it's really frustrating to have to, wild card last week into what felt like peer pressure or FOMO in a way, to then have to free hit this week and just kind of scrap what I was planning for this week. But there is some merit to free hitting this week if you wild carded last week. If you if you liked where you were at last week, chances are you're in a pretty good position this week because you only have to make either 1 or 2 transfers to get where you want to be, or you had a plan in mind to already wild card this week. And if that's the case, you're going to be sitting just fine. But if you're in a position like, I don't know, roughly 50% of players that wild carded last week, whatever the statistics were, this is an interesting week because you set up for 28 and 29 almost, and not specifically 27. And so I think part of the problem is then trying to see who do you bench, right? I mean, because especially if you wild carded last week, you're going to wild card in a really good team. So now looking at this, do I take off a Martinelli away at Fulham for a Dan Burn at home against Wolves? So I think Newcastle will clean against Wolves and have maybe 2 clean sheets there rather than maybe taking the chance of Martinelli. But Martinelli's been playing really well the last couple of weeks, so it's hard to justify sitting him for a possible clean sheet against the Wolves team that looks a little better. I mean, Lopetegui he's still struggling a bit, but he's getting them somewhat closer to what I feel like he wants them to be, getting closer to the end of the season here. So that's something to consider. I know if we look at Galley's team here, and I guess I can't see what the fixtures are going to be for Galley this upcoming week, so never mind. I'm going to leave it at this here so we can take a look at that some further. If we go into, let's just maybe take a look here. I have $500,000 left if I wanted to transfer anybody out. So this is kind of where we're sitting at here. Again, talked about maybe taking out Holland for a potential player like Darwin Nunez. We throw him up here for the Bournemouth fixture, then have 3.6 in the bank for then being able to use that in 28, because 28 then, if we look at 28 right now, I can't move forward. I thought I could move forward. Well, there's a website that lets me do that, and that's going to show up here in just a second while I talk some more to try and excuse the little. Let me actually try the Live FPL. I think it was. There we go. Yeah, let me move over to this screen here. So this is what we're looking at for Gameweek 28. This is the big blank, right? The big blank with Brighton, with City, with Liverpool, Fulham. And what we see here is if I did, Trippier, let's see, Trippier for Stupinan. Nope, can't do that. What if I take him out like that? Okay, never mind. Sorry. So and this is what Galley was talking about, potentially bringing in Ollie Watkins in this situation when you have that blank, right? You've got Villa here who are going to be playing against Bournemouth at home. So that could be a really good fixture. We also have Gabriel Jesus possibly being back at home against Palace, so that's something to consider as well. And you never know. If Jesus is fit and he's playing like he was playing really early in the season, then we could see a couple good returns. Tony's also home at Leicester. So there are some options here, especially if you don't have one of Tony already or one of Brentford's attacking players. I think Mbeumo is only owned by like 1.2% of people, so there's not many people out there that are holding on to him like I am. So Watkins is a good shout there. Past that, I think they also are showing the likes of Eddie Nketiah. Maybe Brennan Johnson would be an interesting shout here as well with Forest. They're home against Newcastle. So, if you believe in Forest at home, scoring one, pinching one against Newcastle, maybe it would be Brandon Johnson who's on the end of that. But as it stands here, I do like where I'm at for 28, especially if I do move off of Holland to Darwin this week. I know I won't have the double transfer for 28, but all I would have to do is move Darwin to someone else, and then I feel pretty good about it. And then I'd still have what I essentially was setting up for in 29, which is when we look at 29 here. I don't want to save anything. Just redo it. There we go. When we look at 29, there is the Kepa double against Villa and Liverpool. and then the Brentford double, the Brighton double, the Leicester double, good big one. So I know Ward is one that's being looked at for possible keeper for the double because of Crystal Palace and Aston Villa. Away at Palace, home to Villa, not terrible fixtures by any means. Then you have the likes of Salah. That could be a good shout here as well, especially if you have some money left over. If I do have some money from moving from Holland down to Darwin, to Watkins, whatever the case might be, I could then upgrade a Madison up to a Mohamed Salah potentially and have that double game week against City and Chelsea. Because like I was saying, defensively, Liverpool assets for the double might not be great, but attacking offensively, having one of Mo or Darwin for the double would be great. Maybe just it's as simple as bringing on Darwin, holding through the blank, and maybe moving a different piece from the blank, and then just keeping him then for the double here in 29. So, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Like I said, I'm kind of upset that I didn't. I did wild card in the end because I just felt like I was doing what everyone else was doing because I didn't want to miss out on anything. And unfortunately, that's what happened. So it is what it is. You just kind of move on. If you do scroll down, there's some more interesting statistics and more interesting. There it gives you proposed transfers potentially to see what you can look at. This is Live FPL is what the website is. It's a great tool, honestly. If you haven't used it yet, this transfer planner is really cool because you can actually go in, save your transfers, and it'll keep track of all of this fun stuff and calculate, what the game thinks or what the website thinks you'll gain or lose in making certain transfers. Obviously, you can take it with a grain of salt because it's hard to predict anything from 3 weeks out. And that's sort of the other thing about wildcarding last week is, wildcarding for something in 4 weeks in the future can be really difficult because there's going to be 3 weeks in between those two, or 2 weeks in between them, been 3 weeks including last week, of things that could happen, of players that could get hurt, of dynamics changing, this and that. So yeah, it's something that you want to look out for and not necessarily pull the trigger because everyone else is pulling the trigger. That's kind of what, like I've been saying, is what I ended up doing. And like I've been saying, so be it. It is what it is. But yeah, so I don't know what else to really go over here. I think Gally would be semi-proud of me piecing this together. He might, if he is watching this, and if he's listening right now, you are a trooper, and I can't believe you have sat through all of this, and I can't believe you would be doing this, but thank you, I guess. So yeah, I think what I will end with is, go back to this tab, I guess, is we'll be keeping an eye on Pep now, especially with his amazing week last week compared to everyone else. And if we just click on his team here, he is, as you can see here, 25-36 overall. Pretty incredible. So we're going to keep our eye on that. It'd be pretty cool to see if he was able to move up to the top 1,000 overall and have a person in our league as top 1,000 be really, really cool. Rooting for him. Looks like he is on 3 Brentford assets and just 2 Brighton assets. Good call on sitting March. I guess it wouldn't have mattered. He would have had an extra point if he did play March, but didn't lose too many points on the bench. He kind of went sort of template with what everyone else was doing, which is fine. The only difference was he kept Mo, which a lot of wildcarders did not because they were worried about the blank. So he went against that, and good for him on that because that really did help improve his standings. If he had capped Mo, that would have been amazing. Mo would have been at 42. He would have had an extra 17 points, sitting on 79. That's a really nice big game week. I don't know how many people had pretty big game weeks here. If we just scroll through our American Scotcher Cup, we can just take a look. Toss my Salah at 71. That's pretty good. Clown Patriots at 77. Pretty good. 77. 90 from Darwinning Selection. That's not bad at all. 90 is a very good score. 88. Let's see what 88 had. So Darwinning Selection. So we had Ward, Tarkovsky, White, Trent, Rashford, Saka, Matoma, Salah, Tony, Holland, Darwin. So yeah, on not a wild card. So I was able to then use this week to move on. Oh, if he had played Andreas, the extra 6 points, you would have 96. That would be pretty impressive. So, oh, you guys can't see this at all because I didn't share this tab. This is the tab that you should be looking at, right? I apologize. I'm doing what I can, and I feel like this has been working with just sharing the tabs from bouncing from one to another. It's been great. So this has been this week's episode of the Fantasy Show. I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I probably just talked a bunch of nonsense because that's usually what happens, but that's fine. It's all part of the game. So as the great Galley would say, I hope your transfers hit. I hope your captain's haul. And I hope that your game weeks are more bountiful than ours. And until next time, I've been Matosh as your host and only here. And next week, we will be back to regular scheduled programming with Galley as our host and a little bit more back and forth. So thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe to American Scouser if you haven't yet. We appreciate all the support. And until next time, take care.